It's your Friday News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer on this June 26th, 2026. Coming up later in the program, Iowa School Choice Program cost taxpayers $250 million, most of it for kids already bound for private school. Also, a new Iowa law aims to ban mail-order abortion pills. But can it work? And the Attorney General of Iowa has charged 8 Iowans with illegal voting. 3 acquittals so far. More trials to come. We'll learn more about that. And IPR's Tressa Glass grooves us into the weekend. So we have plenty in store for you this hour. But first, this week, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a major ruling in a case with, well, some real consequences for Iowa farmers, consumers, anyone really who has ever sprayed Roundup on their lawn or fields. It was a 7-2 decision. The High Court ruled that federal pesticide law blocks state-level lawsuits alleging that Monsanto failed to warn consumers about Roundup's alleged cancer risks. Now, the ruling effectively shields Monsanto's parent company, Bayer, from tens of thousands of pending lawsuits. It also raises big questions about who gets to decide what goes on a pesticide label and what recourse ordinary people have when they believe a product made them sick. Earlier today, I spoke with IPR state government reporter Katerina Sestarik. Hi, Katerina.
Hi, Ben.
Walk us through, first of all, what the court decided, what it means in plain terms for us, for someone who has been using Roundup for years and is worried about their health.
Yeah, so the U.S. Supreme Court has sided with Bayer, which owns Monsanto, the maker of Roundup, and they ruled that the maker of Roundup can't be sued for failing to warn people that this popular weed killer could cause cancer. So this comes from thousands of lawsuits filed by people with certain types of cancer who, believe that their cancer was caused by exposure to Roundup. And this Supreme Court decision is expected to basically block those lawsuits. Bayer has already paid out billions of dollars in settlements for some of these lawsuits. But they're, going through lots of different efforts to try to limit these lawsuits going forward and to limit their liability going forward. And so this also follows, failed efforts in the Iowa legislature and in Congress to limit lawsuits over pesticide-related illness.
Mm-hmm. How do the critics of this ruling respond to that argument, and who are they?
You have actually both candidates for Iowa governor, Republican Zach Lane and Democrat Rob Sand, who seem to agree on this, at least, that they both are heavily criticizing this ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court. Lane is, aligned with the Make America Healthy Again movement that is opposed to pesticide liability shields and, is focused on more organic foods and things like that in general. So he said this was a terrible decision. It's not a win for farmers. He's saying that farmers have lost their ability to have recourse when they're harmed by pesticides, and that this civil liability is a key part of the free market, and that's been taken away. And then you have Rob Sand, the Democratic candidate for Iowa governor, who called the decision wrong and gross and says it'll continue to make life worse for Iowans. And so both of them say that they would oppose any efforts in the legislature to shield pesticide companies from certain lawsuits.
Yeah. And also an interesting pairing in the High Court decision, 70-2, the two dissenters, not usually lining up together. Justice Jackson dissenting, joined by Justice Gorsuch. So glyphosate in Roundup everywhere in Iowa agriculture. What are farmers and farm workers here likely to take away from this ruling?
Well, there's definitely a split. When we saw this issue going through the Iowa legislature, there was a bill that would have had a similar effect to this Supreme Court ruling, and it was very intensely debated. And you had, like the Iowa Department of Agriculture, along with the Iowa Corn Growers Association, Soybean Association, Farm Bureau, who were all in support of limiting these lawsuits, saying that, if these lawsuits continue, that the access to glyphosate, which is an important tool for farmers, could be at risk. And some also raised, they thought that there's a plant in Muscatine that produces glyphosate, and some people were saying that that plant could be threatened too by these lawsuits. But then you had some other, like the Iowa Farmers Union and some other groups on the other side who were saying, there's actually no threat to glyphosate going away or this plant in Muscatine going away. And this is just actually going to harm farmers by taking away their ability to sue when they believe they've been harmed by these products. And, there are some Iowans who have sued or tried to sue Bayer over what they believe to be is their cancer related to Roundup. So it was a very intense debate, and I expect it will continue to be.
Yeah. If you've just joined us, IPR state government reporter Katerina Sestarik. Katerina, let's pivot to another story this week. Iowa's Department of Health and Human Services, our state agency overseeing Medicaid, food assistance, child welfare, the public health for millions of Iowans, huge budget exceeding $13 billion. It has been in leadership limbo since back in April when Senate Democrats blocked the confirmation of Director Larry Johnson. Now, Governor Reynolds has found a workaround. She's named Iowa Department of Management Director Craig Paulson to lead the HHS while keeping Johnson on as a principal deputy director. Explain what Reynolds did here.
Yeah, so it seems like she kind of found a way to keep her HHS director that she wanted, still as having a major leadership role at the agency, even after the Senate failed to confirm him for that position. It was Senate Democrats who voted against his confirmation in the Senate this year. They were saying that, they were concerned about a lack of transparency and what they saw as diminished services for people through HHS. And so they decided to not support his confirmation. Nominees in the Iowa Senate need a supermajority 2/3 vote to get approved. And so Democrats were able to block his confirmation. And they said that they had serious concerns. And Governor Reynolds called their rejection of Johnson just purely political.
Mm-hmm. And so what are Democrats saying about this workaround that Governor Reynolds has found here?
They're saying that basically she's just disregarding and circumventing the Senate's role in approving department heads by basically they said that, she's reestablishing Larry Johnson as the de facto head of HHS. And so they're, obviously not happy about that. I also think just the timing of all this is interesting with the governor. She's on her way out. She's got about 6 months left in office. So for her to find a new HHS director who then would likely be replaced in about 6 months when there's a new governor, that would be, more turnover in the agency. And I think, the new official director, Craig Paulson, kind of made that point when he said that there needs to be continuity of leadership and experience of leadership to ensure that, Medicaid and SNAP and the important services that HHS provides can continue.
Mm-hmm. So with Larry Johnson now principal deputy director, does it mean in practice he's still running day-to-day operations? Nothing has really changed?
I mean, what Paulson, the new official director, said was that he would delegate anything that he could delegate under Iowa law. He would delegate to Johnson. And then anything that Iowa law specifically says the director has to do, he would retain those duties. Yeah.
6 months left of the Reynolds administration. Can Democrats do anything at this point to stop the arrangement? Would it make sense with a short time frame, I guess, is a good question.
I don't think there's anything that they can do. There's no, current legislative session. By the time they're back in session, there will be a new governor inaugurated the first week of the next legislative session, who will then probably nominate their own HHS director that will then go through the Senate confirmation process. So I'm not sure that there's anything they could do at this point.
Mm-hmm. And Katerina, before we say goodbye, This is your final day at IPR. We're nearing the end of your 9 years at IPR. But you're staying in the state, right?
I am staying in Des Moines, yeah.
Okay, you are staying in Des Moines, and I just want to say, on behalf of the talk show team, we've so appreciated you being with us, our connection to the State House, with your tremendous accomplishments, leading our coverage of 8 legislative sessions, co-hosting Legislative Mondays here on River to River with me, joining us here dozens and dozens of times on News Buzz. So many other things. Part of the leadership of the State Capitol Press Association. And Katerina, you've been such a wonderful colleague to work with. I know I am definitely not alone when I say we will miss you dearly.
Thank you. I'll miss you all too.
I wonder, what will you miss most about your time at IPR? What did you like most about the work here?
Well, just honestly, my awesome colleagues. I'm going to miss everyone I've worked with here at IPR. Just a lot of passionate and fun and kind people to work with. And so I'm really going to miss that. And, as much as hard as it can be to cover the legislative session every year, I do get to, go to the Capitol every day and see my friends from other journalism organizations too, and kind of be in the mix in the middle of it all. And, that's always been an exciting and challenging time. And I'll miss that a bit too. And just being able to share all these stories about state government with our listeners, I'll miss that as well.
Very big shoes to fill. Katerina, thank you so much, and we wish you the very best. Take care.
Thanks, Ben.
Coming up after a short break, Iowa's school choice program costs taxpayers $250 million, most of it for kids already bound for private school. We'll find out more about that. Plenty more to come on this Friday News Buzz edition. I'm Ben Kiefer. Stay tuned. It's your Friday News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Election integrity, that's been a cornerstone of Republican politics nationally and here in Iowa. Our State Attorney General, Brenna Byrd, has put some real prosecutorial muscle behind it. Since taking office in 2023, Byrd has charged 8 Iowans with illegally voting, most of them accused of casting ballots or attempting to do so in local elections between 2021 and 2024 when they were not legally authorized to vote. But as Byrd's office prepares for a re-election campaign this fall, the courtroom scorecard is mixed. 3 acquittals, 1 conviction, and several cases still winding through the courts. William Morris covers courts for the Des Moines Register. He's tracked these cases from the start. I spoke with him yesterday. William, welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Start off by walking us through what the Iowa Attorney General's office has been doing on this front. How many people been charged? What are these cases about at their core?
Well, there have been 8 of these cases that we're aware of, and they began in the fall of 2024 with the first case. There were several cases that year, a bunch more in 2025, and 2 more that we know of filed this year. These have been all over the state, and in each case, as you say, alleged that someone who was not legally allowed to vote, whether or not they were legally residing in Iowa, either cast a ballot or made a false statement to register or otherwise transgress against the voter registration and voting laws.
Mm-hmm. So go into the courtroom record on these cases. 3 acquittals out of the cases that have gone to trial. What has happened in those courtrooms? Juries skeptical? Were they jury trials? Are there problems with the evidence?
These have been all around the state, and I'm afraid I haven't actually been in any of the courtrooms, so I can't speak from firsthand knowledge about what jurors did or didn't hear. But some of the attorneys have, after their clients have been acquitted, have commented that there were problems with intent, that there were problems with the requisite state of mind. The law requires that you knowingly make a false statement or knowingly vote when you're not allowed to. And it appears, according again to these defense attorneys, that in some of these cases, the uh, the juries have been convinced that whatever missteps happened were not intentional.
hmm Can you tell us about one or two cases, the individual qualities of the case? One I see in your article from a Sioux City case, another one in Palo Alto County.
Yes, several of these where someone has voted not once but twice or three times in mostly local elections. I remember there was one gentleman who was charged with voting in a school board election for a tiny little town I'd never heard of, which would seem to bolster the possibility that it might not be intentional. If I knew I was committing a crime, it wouldn't be to vote in the Gretinger school board.
hmm
But of course, that's up to the prosecutors and the jury. As you mentioned, that currently the score stands at four acquittals and one conviction. I should note that in a fifth case, the defendant was convicted. This was the one in Palo Alto County. However, the trial judge later ruled that they had made a mistake in terms of what evidence they permitted to be heard. And so they ruled that the defendant was entitled to a new trial. The state is appealing that. So I believe currently he is, considered not convicted, but that case is still up in the air.
hmm There's an individual charged in connection with the 2024 election. What do we know about that case and its significance? Because that was a presidential election year, of course.
Yes, in particular, one where election integrity was a very contentious issue. As the courts reporter, I was kept very busy before and after that election, covering last minute challenges to ballot access and registration and concerns about illegal voting. After the 2024 election, the Iowa Secretary of State conducted an audit and reported that there had been 35 non-citizens who voted that year, five more who tried to vote, and a total of 277 non-citizens who had been identified on voter rolls around the state. That was in March of 2025, so more than a year ago. And we have been waiting to see any charges related to the 2024 election. And now finally we have one. Last month, prosecutors charged a man in Johnson County with illegally registering and attempting to vote in October of 2024. So presumably that would have been early voting for the presidential election.
William, now, these are real people, of course, some with attorneys, some going through trials. What has the process meant for the individuals charged, whether they win or lose?
Well, I've not spoken with any of these individual defendants, but in general, criminal prosecution is a miserable experience, whether you are ultimately convicted or acquitted. I don't believe most of these people would have been spending significant time in jail, but they've had to, retain attorneys in some cases at considerable expense. There's months of hearings and legal process, and there's this enormous stress in knowing that you could potentially face fines, probation, prison time hanging over your head, and whether you are eventually acquitted or not, that takes a toll.
As I mentioned, Attorney General Byrd running for re-election this fall, William, I wonder, I don't know if you see it in your purview or as a reporter on the courts, to separate the prosecutorial decisions here from the political context of her campaign. Her office says elections in Iowa can be decided by very few votes, true. And so she says every illegal vote matters. Does that argument hold up when you look at the actual elections involved in these cases?
Well, again, many of these are in, small town local elections, and it would not surprise me if some of those races were decided by a fairly narrow margin. But I think everyone agrees that it's important that, only people who are permitted to vote are actually voting. The question then is whether a crime has been committed, and that is what the Attorney General's office has been attempting to prove in these cases. In three cases, they have not, and in one, they have.
Mm-hmm. We have to say, though, it's rare for a non-citizen voting nationally and here in Iowa. what I'm asking, no evidence of a widespread problem here. These are cases at the margins. Would you agree?
We're not aware of anything connecting any of these individuals or any of these cases. These are different elections, different years, in different counties. So we're not aware of any reason to believe that there's any sort of widespread conspiracy or widespread effort to invalidate votes or invalidate elections.
Quickly, before we say goodbye, William, several cases still pending. I think 2 trials coming up this summer. What are the key things you'll be watching and that listeners should follow in the months ahead in this story?
Well, as I mentioned, there were allegedly 40 people who voted or attempted to vote illegally in 2024. We've only seen one case so far, so I'm very curious to see if there are going to be any more cases charged related to the 2024 election. And, of course, we're curious to see what the verdicts are.
Mm-hmm. William Morris, courts reporter for the Des Moines Register. We're talking about the Iowa Attorney General's pursuit of illegal voting cases and what the courtroom results so far tell us. William, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Glad you're on board for this News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Iowa's Education Savings Account program, that's also known as the state's school voucher system, now in its 3rd year. For the first time this year, it came with no income limits. That means any Iowa family can receive state money to send their child to a private school. Now, Iowa State Auditor Rob Sand released a report last week with quite a striking finding. Nearly 80% of students using the vouchers were already projected to attend private schools before the program ever existed. Sand's conclusion, therefore, that Iowa taxpayers paid about $258 million in fiscal year 2026 to subsidize private school tuition that families would have paid on their own anyway. Republicans in the Iowa Department of Education have pushed back on this hard, and the political subtext is impossible to ignore. Rob Sand, of course, the Democratic nominee for governor. Cami Coons reports for Iowa Capital Dispatch. I spoke with her about this yesterday. Cami, welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Walk us through what Auditor Rob Sand found and what he did and didn't look at to reach that large $258 million figure.
Yeah, so you got the basics of that there. So the report looked at that, found that 80% figure that these students would have already attended non-public schools. So that 80% comes from a 2022 projection from the Department of Education. So the department makes those projections of how many students they think are going to be enrolled in public and non-public schools. Just standard. This projection from 2022 was before the ESA program was put into place. And essentially, the report shows that this 2022 projection was 8,800 some students fewer than what we actually had this past school year. So that's saying that 80%, or about 33,000 students who attended non-public school were already projected to attend non-public school this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then that 200 some million dollar amount is that 80% of the total allocation for the ESA program for fiscal year 2026.
Only 2% of private schools that have opened since 2023 are state accredited. That's compared to 66% of older private schools. That has to have some impact on accountability, doesn't it?
Well, that's certainly what the auditor implied in a press conference about this report. Yeah, the report found that 2% of those non-public schools sought state accreditation versus using an independent agency that is approved by the state to offer accreditation. So the State Department of Ed countered and basically said that this figure was due to the number of new schools opening and also existing schools choosing to become accredited. They didn't necessarily address why they would choose one or the other, aside from the fact that when that process was put in place, that it had bipartisan support when that process was put in place to allow independent agencies to accredit schools.
Something else that jumped out to me in your reporting, Iowa now has 232 private schools. That's up from a projected 174. Closures are also up sharply. What's SAND's read on what's happening there?
Basically, the report showed that with all of these schools that are opening and closing, a lot of them are smaller. And then also it showed that a lot of these schools will shut down from 1 year and then maybe reopen the next year, or will just be open for like 1 year, which SAND basically said, makes it difficult for families to know that a school is going to be there or not there. It doesn't have a lot of consistency.
Mm-hmm. Let's go a bit to the pushback. The Department of Education in the state says SAND didn't consult them, didn't let them check the data, left out nearly $38 million in public school payments. And of course, as mentioned at the beginning, the political elephant in the room, SAND is the Democratic nominee for governor. Republicans are saying this is really campaign material dressed up as an official report. Again, it's not an audit. How does SAND respond to those criticisms? And for you, how do we separate the political context from the data that Auditor SAND brought out here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's one of those things where we as news consumers and readers really have to look at all the facts that are put before us, that yes, we are in the middle of a very big governor's campaign that Rob Sand is a part of. His response to that critique is that, hey, I want Iowans to know these numbers regardless, because this is a lot of taxpayer dollars. But that being said, this is also, the school choice program is something that he has been critical of in the past and is something that Republicans are very supportive of. So it's definitely a political talking point to push back on this. And then it also fits in with, Republicans are critiquing Sand for spending his time focusing on his campaign rather than official audit duties, which they say that this report did not fall under. So those are really the two big political axes of this argument here.
Cammie, so this isn't the first fight between Rob Sand and the Reynolds administration over ESA data. He says they withheld documents last year. His formal audit in February found no irregularities. How does that history shape how we read this new report of his?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely shows that this has been an area of tension between Sand's office and other departments or people who are critical of his office and him as a politician. So yeah, he has previously critiqued the State Departments for not giving him certain data that he wanted. It was kind of a back and forth. Eventually, he did get the data, as you mentioned, and didn't find any issues or irregularities with his official audit. And at the time then, when he was critiquing the departments, Governor Reynolds also said that it was a politically motivated attack on the ESA program. So they're both kind of having the same arguments again with this.
Yeah. And as mentioned at the outset, this is the first year that the program has no income limits, meaning wealthy families can now get vouchers too. Does SAND's data shed any light on who's actually using the program now that those limits are gone?
I think the main thing that this report goes off of is, again, that projected figure versus what we actually have here. And, what the report is leaning on is that it's not really that many more students, despite the fact that this has a pretty significant spending level for the state.
Cammie, going forward, what will you be watching? How do you see this developing?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely going to be a topic that comes up again as we get closer to Election Day, because clearly we've got some history here, and the school choice ESA program is something that people care about on both sides and want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Cammie Coons of Iowa Capitol Dispatch talking about a new report from the state auditor, Rob Sand, concluding that Iowa taxpayers spent roughly $258 million in the last fiscal year subsidizing private school tuition for students who would have attended private school anyway. His conclusion. Cammie Coons, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A new law signed by Governor Reynolds in May that takes effect on July 1st takes aim at medication abortion, requiring that abortion pills be dispensed in person by a healthcare provider. But can it actually work? In just a moment, reporter Maya Marshallhoff on that, and IPR's Tressa Glass grooves us into the weekend when your Friday News Buzz continues. I'm Ben Kiefer. It's River to River from IPR News. It's your Friday News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Time enough for a quick check of the weather. Mark DeBryan is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Des Moines. Mark, hi.
Hey, Ben. How are you?
I'm fine. Pretty pleasant stretch for late June by Iowa standards, but get ready, right? Prolonged and dangerous heat and humidity coming our way soon.
Yeah, that's right. We've been at least for central Iowa, we've been about normal temperatures through the month of June. Really haven't had that first major heat wave of the summer yet. But starting Sunday and Monday, we're going to have heat indices, heat and humidity, heat indices up into at least 100 degrees, if not towards 105 across a large part of the state. And that heat is going to really stick around through a large part of the week and likely into the 4th of July weekend as well.
Mm-hmm. What is driving the pattern?
Yeah, so there is a high pressure that's setting up to our southeast, and that's going to be pretty effective at bringing in a lot of extra heat from the southern and southwest U.S. And on top of that, we're going to get a lot of humidity that comes in with that. And so, the two together are going to make temperatures by themselves are going to be into the low, mid, even upper 90s for a large stretch of days. On top of that, you have really high humidity, and so that's what's really going to be driving up those heat indices.
Is this part of a larger weather pattern that's going to likely shape the rest of the summer, Mark, or do we know that yet?
Not necessarily. I can say this pattern is going to be pretty persistent for, at least the next week or two. Beyond that, it's tough to say whether or not this will be something that sticks around through the summer. This is really something that we've been looking at for the next week and a half, though.
Okay, Mark DeBryan, meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Des Moines. Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah, no problem.
It's your Friday News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Our state already has one of the most restrictive abortion landscapes in the country. A 2024 Iowa law bans most abortions once cardiac activity is detected. That's typically around 6 weeks, often before a woman knows she's pregnant. Now, a new law, this was signed by Governor Reynolds in May, takes aim at medication abortion, requiring that abortion pills be dispensed in person by a healthcare provider starting this July 1st. The move targets a quiet but significant shift that's happened since Roe was overturned. More and more Iowans have been obtaining abortion pills by mail from providers in other states. Maya Marshallhoff reports for the Des Moines Register. She's been covering this story. I spoke with her yesterday. Maya, as noted, this law takes effect July 1st in a few days. Walk our listeners through what it actually does. What changes here on that date for Iowans seeking a medication abortion?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this new law will require Iowans to go in person to a healthcare provider in order to be dispensed or receive the abortion pill. Typically, it's mifepristone, and the new law specifies it's mifepristone, which is taken within the first 10 weeks of conception that blocks the hormone progesterone needed for pregnancy to continue. And then the second one is taken after it's misoprostol, which is usually taken following mifepristone in a certain time window. And so it will require that in-person visit. There are a couple different steps that the physician or the doctor will need to go through with the patients, including screening them for signs of abuse or coercion before dispensing abortion pills. It will also require healthcare providers to inform patients that patients using abortion-inducing drugs have, quote, suffered trauma from seeing the remains of the unborn child in the process of a chemical abortion, end quote, according to the law. as you mentioned, a lot of Iowans are going out of the state for abortion pills, so it's still kind of gray as to how broad this will actually be and how many Iowans are actually getting the medication in the state.
Right. Let's explore that grayness. The law bans mail order abortion pills in Iowa. It's a state law. Doctors in New York or California prescribing under their own state's shield laws aren't subject to our Iowa law. So what does this law actually stop? And that's the gray area you're talking about, right?
Right. So, as you mentioned, these shield laws really complicate the scope that Iowa's new law is able to have over providers in different states that are protected by their own state laws. So, right now, at the federal level, there is a court case in progress about whether or not to ban mail order abortions, to ban states, providers in other states from mailing pills to other states. And so while that plays out, the Supreme Court has paused that for now and has temporarily allowed these shield laws to stand and these providers to continue mailing these pills to other states. We're really kind of waiting on that because that will have a lot of trickle down effects. But as of now, Iowa doesn't really have a lot of power over other states. What they do have power over is the prescriptions within the states over telehealth. So under the law, Iowans will not be able to get abortion pills from their providers within Iowa from via telehealth. They have to go in person. Now, according to a lot of physicians I spoke with and Planned Parenthood, this isn't super common for Iowans to get their medication abortions through telehealth from their providers in the state. They're primarily and predominantly going out of the state to do that. And what that means is that although it's banned in Iowa, that's not going to really have a huge impact just because it can't stop the huge amount that's already coming from other states as federal law stands.
As you noted, though, in your reporting, Maya, even if the law can't stop pills from being mailed, patients and providers might not know that. There may be a chilling effect. Let's talk about the Iowans you see as most affected by this. Is this concentrated in rural areas or felt statewide?
What many reproductive rights advocates have argued and physicians across the state is this impact is going to be most significant for folks in rural areas. Like I mentioned, the predominant way that these pills are being prescribed in Iowa as of 2024 is, or a little bit before that when the most recent abortion law went into effect, a lot of the key providers of the pill in the state, which are in major metro areas, Iowa City, Des Moines, that's where they could access that. Now, if folks in rural areas who are facing confusion under this law, they see that they may not be able to get mail order abortion pills like they have been from other states. Healthcare providers have argued that that is really what could cause more barriers. They already had barriers because they would have to go to one of these clinics, but after this law, nothing is really changing besides just the conversation around it and the messaging around it. So if they are not aware that they can still go to other states, I think that's where the confusion could come in.
So Maya, there's also a civil lawsuit side of this story. Briefly tell us about that.
Yeah, so Iowa's new law would allow an interested party to bring a civil action against providers in other states who violate the bill's dispensing requirements. That can include the biological father of the fetus that was attempted to be aborted according to the law, or grandparent, parent, sibling, child, or legal guardian of the person who went through a medication abortion. Again, along with the scope of this law, this will only apply to states that don't have shield laws or specific protections for their physicians. And again, a lot of Iowans are getting their pills from states with shield law protections. So this won't apply to those states.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Governor Reynolds, of course, not seeking re-election. She signed this. Attorney General Byrd is running on election integrity and culturally conservative issues. How does this fit into the broader political moment for Iowa Republicans, you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Abortion specifically has been one of those issues that's kind of not been swept under the rug, but kind of fallen to the wayside of a lot of different issues facing politicians and on the minds of voters this year, including affordability, the economy, war, average prices. And so it will be really interesting to see how this issue comes up in the election. I think that some candidates maybe shying away from it, that, Iowa has hit on a lot of its priorities that it's wanted to, especially Republicans from the pro-life community. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to emphasize this issue on the campaign trail. We haven't seen much of that yet, but we may continue to see more pressure from pro-life groups nationally and in the state to pin down lawmakers and folks running for office on this issue. So although it's not as big as it has been in past election years, I think that this issue on the forefront, especially at the national level, this could definitely come up again.
All right. Iowa, one of over a dozen states requiring in-person dispensing, according to state laws. Briefly, before we say goodbye, Maya, after July 1st, after this law takes effect, what will you be watching for legally, politically, in terms of what happens to patients on the ground?
Yeah, I think that I will be watching what folks are doing for reproductive health care in the state. Obviously, since the 1-year anniversary of the 2024 law at the end of July went into passed at the end of last July, we saw that numbers of Iowans seeking abortions, specifically surgical abortions, surged going to other states. And so I'm really curious to keep an eye on those numbers. Where are folks going? It's really hard to pin down numbers on medication abortion just because there's a lot of different sources, but anything I can grasp with that to see whether or not there's a decline of people accessing, whether or not they are going in person for these abortions, and just to see the impact on healthcare providers in the state as it continues to change this landscape. Iowa's facing an OBGYN shortage, and some folks argue that these laws are pushing potential residents or medical students away from the state. And so alongside all of these abortion laws being implemented, it'll be really interesting to continue to see the state of reproductive health care in these rural areas especially.
Maya Marshall-Hoff is with the Des Moines Register. We've been talking about a new Iowa law taking effect July 1st, requiring abortion pills be dispensed in person in the state, and also why experts are skeptical it will actually stop mail-order pills from reaching Iowans who want them via mail. Maya, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's your Friday News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Joining us now to groove us into the weekend, as we love to do on Friday afternoons, Tressa Glass, Studio One host here at IPR. Hi, Tressa.
Hi, Ben.
Now we get to have you groove us into the weekend. What do you have?
First up, we have a new Weezer album coming out in August. Once again, it is self-titled, but they're calling this one the Gold Album. And they've released their first single from it, and to Studio One's delight, it features the band Wednesday, a Studio One favorite. I'd also like to mention that Weezer did drop this single on a Wednesday, so we should have known what was afoot. A couple of notes about this song. Rivers Cuomo rhymes Nietzsche, yes, the German philosopher and writer, with how much I need ya, which is cool. And if this is your first time hearing the voice of the band Wednesday's Carly Hartzman on the second verse, you're in for a treat. Her voice is so cool and just scratches an itch in my brain. Let's listen to We Might As Well Be Strangers by Weezer featuring Wednesday.
To why we lost you. We might as well be strangers. Something came along and changed us. I was Nancy, you were vicious. And I'm not sure I even miss us. If I sang you a song, would you still sing along? We might as well be strangers. Something came along and changed us.
We Might As Well Be Strangers, a new one by Weezer featuring Wednesday. I love it, Tressa. What else do you have for us?
Next up, I have the artist CMAT with When a Good Man Cries. So, a little backstory. Pop superstar Olivia Rodrigo is currently doing press for her new album, and she paid a visit to the BBC Radio Live Lounge, where there's a tradition for the visiting artist to perform a cover song of their choice. She selected the 2025 song by CMAT, When a Good Man Cries, and I am thrilled to say that now Olivia Rodrigo fans and all of TikTok are now discovering the majesty of CMAT. CMAT is a Euro country artist from Ireland. I call her Irish Dolly Parton. I am obsessed with her. She is incredibly funny. She has razor sharp Irish wit and deep emotional sincerity with her songwriting. I actually heard Brandi Carlile on a podcast recently talk about how obsessed she is with CMAT and how she's going to explode soon. And I think we are entering that time zone for the explosion. And she's coming to Iowa. She's performing at Hinterland Music Festival this summer on Saturday, August 1st. So let's have a listen to When a Good Man Cries by CMAT.
When a Good Man Cries by CMAT. And as Tressa mentioned, CMAT performing at Hinterland this year. We'll go out with that. Tressa, thanks for grooving us into the weekend.
Thanks for having me.
Get your daily soundtrack of the best in new music and old favorites. IPR Studio One is there for you 24/7. Stream online at studio1.org. Download the IPR Studio One app, or in Des Moines, listen at 94.1 FM. Tressa, you have a good weekend. Have a good weekend, everyone. Today's program produced by Caitlin Troutman, our executive producer, Catherine Perkins. I'm Ben Kiefer.